So now let's get the camera following our game object. So normally what we would do is often is just to take the main camera and make it a child of the player the game object that we want to follow. In this case, it's not a great idea because it's part of the way that we're moving this through the scene is causing this game object to rotate. And so because this main camera is now a child of this, it will inherit any of that rotation that's happening. So for example, it will look like this. Kind of cool, but also not great. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to make this return this back to the root of our hierarchy here. And instead what we're going to do is we're going to control this movement through a script that we write. And I'm going to go back down to project here, and we're in our scripts folder already. And inside of this folder, we're going to create a new C# script. And let's just call this one camera follow. And then we'll add this component to our main camera. So camera follow. Now, what we want to do with this camera is we want to adjust it. So we want to make sure it's exactly in the right position that's framing our player game object in the scene. And so I'm going to just drag this up a little bit more and maybe rotate it along this axis just to kind of make it a little bit closer to how I want it to follow. I'm going to change over here so that the tool handle rotation is happening at a local, is relative to like the local rotation of the game object. That way it just makes it easier for me to like zoom in and kind of pull this without having to continually adjust back and forth between the rotation and the movement. So I'm happy with that, I think, at least in this example. I could switch this back to global just because it's easy for me then to just make some subtle tweaks to it. Now, I'm going to go and open up this camera follow script that we created in our programming editor. And we're going to just create a very simple script here, which does two things. The first thing it does is that it gets us our position of our camera relative to the position of the player object at start. So that's very important because we spent a lot of time here, or maybe not a lot of time, but we spent some time trying to set it up so that we're viewing the player in a specific sort of way. And so this will allow us to respect that even as we're following the player game object through the scene. We also want to make sure that we are updating the position of the camera so that it takes into account that offset and adds it to whatever the player's game object transform position is at the end of each cycle. And so what we'll do is we'll start first by creating a public game object variable, and we'll use this to keep track of our player. So because it's because it's public, we're going to go back into our inspector and remember to set this to our player game object. This is something I always forget to do, so we'll see if I remember it this time. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a private variable, and this one's going to be a vector3. We're going to try to store the coordinates here in three-dimensional space that keep track of our camera offset. So I'm going to go ahead and call this one camera offset. And then down below here in our start function, I'm going to go ahead and populate this to take a look at what the position of the camera is relative to the player when we start playing our game. And so in this case, I'm going to say camera offset is equal to transform dot position minus player dot transform position. And so we're just looking at the difference between these two, both the camera here, which is our transform position because that's the game object that we have this script applied to, minus the player's transform position to just establish what that distance needs to be. And Now what we're going to do down below is we're going to update that. So as the player moves through space, we'll take those coordinates and then we'll add the offset to them as a way of setting our camera's position. We want this to happen after the player has moved, so we're going to change this from update to late update. And now we're going to say transform dot position. So that's the camera's position, is equal to the player.transform.position plus camera offset. And once we do that, we can save it and we can head back to Unity and we can press play. As soon as we also set, I almost forgot it here, as soon as we set in our main camera our player game object in our camera follow component that we've created. So I'm going to take this ball here and I'm going to just put it right there, right? So we're giving the camera something to follow. If we don't, we're going to end up getting just some exception that lets us know that we've forgotten to populate that field. No big deal. If that's the case, just go ahead and drag the thing that you want to follow into this player field, and then we can hit play. And now as we move, you can see that the camera is staying relative to the position of that ball as it moves through space.